In, we're here. Welcome back to another episode, you guys. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for stopping by. I love those moments on the intro when you get the last little bits of the music, and I'm swinging my arms around like some sort of colossal idiot, and the viewer count goes down immediately. It's a reassuring thing. It's a reassuring thing. Good afternoon to Paolo. Good to see you. So let's get this out on the open straight away. If anybody is noticing something audibly, physically, visually wrong with me, I'm very tired. So I am not my usual energetic self, and it's. I'm going to be honest with you. My enthusiasm is going to be diminished as a result. Not least of all because I'm standing up. I could have chosen to sit down, but it would have meant rearranging the light structures and whatnot, and I didn't want to do that. So here I am standing, talking to you guys, and what a week it's been. We're back with another body language video that we did. Many of you already asking about these, so I'll show them to you properly in a few moments. We looked at the Fiona Harvey interview with Piers Morgan, and we put it out the other day, a few days ago now, actually, 12th of May. And we're doing pretty well so far. We're doing pretty well so far. But it was one of those things that was based on the podcast idea that I had a while back to do the anti-snake oil sales of people reading and interpretation that you see online, to kind of focus on the movable parts that can be proven or that can be supported by evidence, and slash or taking stock of the many flaws in our own ability to reason and think as individuals, which is why these come into play. And for those of you listening to just the audio version after the fact, these are the cognitive biases deck from Escaping Ordinary. And again, I keep saying, because I'm going on about them so much, I'm not affiliated with them at all. They don't even know I'm doing this. I just think they're a bloody good deck for you to get your hands on, and there are many ways that you can go about doing this. Let me show you what they are, first of all. A list of biases. I mean, forget the fact that the cards are on really good stock and they look great, and there's this kind of lovely metallic shim down the side that kind of appeals to my quirkiness in that way, but the detail in them is pretty good as well. So if you take the top one, the availability bias, right? It states in terms of visual images and information, we estimate the likelihood of something happening by the examples most readily available in our memory. And goes into tons of detail of how you can make this an understanding of the way that you reason with information for yourself. And the great thing about this is, like I was saying to a lot of the guys that train with me, we are fans of training by memorizing cards. Why not get some actual honest to goodness education and some good training in for the way that you interact with non-verbal information from wherever you make your deductions, and how we can sharpen them as a result. If you don't want to do the entire deck in one sitting, just take one a day. The fundamental attribution error. We judge others' behavior on their personality or fundamental character, but we attribute our own behaviors to situational factors. So many people fall foul of all of these. And the interesting thing to note is the more that you become aware of them, the more possibility you can have with mitigating their influence on what it is that you're doing in that way, right? Can we as human beings ever completely turn off our biases? No. We're humans. We function in the same way that humans do, not robots, you know? So there is an ebbing and a flowing, a toing and a froing to all of this information that we see existing within the realms of that which we observe. But the more awareness we have to that which can hurt or harm our ability to reason and think more clearly about what it is that we've seen, the better chance we stand of mitigating its influence. Mitigating is the best word for that, right? Because we can't completely get rid of it. And what I like about these cards as well is they come with tests, right? A deck, and there's loads. I haven't counted them, but there's all of these questions, and if you look on them on the side, like question 111, we tend to be notoriously poor at thinking statistically. We prefer to see the world through the stories we tell ourselves. Is that A, an availability cascade, B, an availability bias, C, a confirmation bias, or D, an anchoring effect? Right? It is a little like, a chef in that situation. The more knowledge they have about what can go wrong during a recipe and how they create their beautiful finished product, the more opportunity they'd have to mitigate the risk of it going wrong by doing XYZ, whatever it is. I don't know. I'm big fat not a cook in that way. Let's have a look. Paolo. The fact that we'll never be completely free of biases is something that still bugs me and haunts me a bit. And it's an interesting catch-22, because though we will never be free of them, the more awareness we have in that way will ultimately mean we can question them accordingly. And I'll give you a couple of stories that I was talking about on a podcast earlier with some of the guys I work with at Vibe Methodology. A friend, I used to work as a personal trainer years ago, and I was training a friend of mine, and he was after a personal best on the deadlift. For whatever reason, that's what he was after, and he was stuck at 100. I say stuck at 100. So he's deadlifting away. The second we added anything else on, couldn't move it anyway. But he was adding things on in terms of 10, 15, 20 kg. So I was like, right, get rid of that. Blindfold yourself. I took it down to 20 kg, then up to 80, then down to 10, then to 50, then 95. When I was playing with the weights, so he didn't know what was coming. And in the end, he went straight up to 110. No messing. Took the blindfold off his head when he was stood up holding it just so he could see. In that way, right? These stories that we tell ourselves about the way that we interact with information are key in surpassing it, right? So with that, and I don't know how this fits with you, Paolo. I'm just using what you said as an example. It might be different for you. It might be the same. I'm just using that as an example. The fact that we will never be completely free of biases is something that still bugs me and haunts me a bit. Phrasing it as a fact is a start, right? A fact in our own heads is immutable in that way, which sounds needlessly picky and like I'm being quite overly granular about something. But that's not the case. I'm truly understanding what it moves and how it interacts with it in that way. Ian, his name, in that situation was under the belief that it was a fact that he couldn't pick up anything more than 100. When if I'd rested a coat on there, it might have been a few extra grams, but that was above 100. He could move that. He just wouldn't qualify it in the same way as a plate. So there's wiggle room already within that fact. So though we might never be completely free of bias, there is still wiggle room for us to be able to question it more critically. And this is part and parcel of a good training ground in that way. Because Sherlock, were he a real person back then doing what he did, would have had to have made himself aware of these particular things as well, which is why I look into the work of Charles Sanders Peirce and his work on reasoning and critical thinking around pragmatics and mathematician type diligence in that particular way. I'm not a mathematician, so I don't know of the right language to use in terms of his discipline. So he would have had to have made himself aware of the same things, and in order for Sherlock, being as emotional as he was, because he wasn't emotionless, that's a huge misconception. So being as emotional as what he was would mean that he was prone to a heightened degree of emotional bias, his confidence, his memory, the availability of information at our fingertips. Just because we can connect it to the information there, does that ultimately make it spot on or correct with what we're thinking? And formulating that aspect into your day-to-day training is a way for you to stomp regular training grounds in the same way that Sherlock would have had to at that particular time. You have to question the observations that you make. Spoken about this a few times. What's the easiest way to prove that something is? Trying to prove that it isn't. Right? So there is a similar thing that I get asked around training in that way when it comes. I think it might have been you, Paolo. I'm not 100% sure. So please again correct me if I'm wrong. That spoke about the confidence with confirming your deductions and the confidence with confirming some of the things that you've gone into. You might sit there and go, not the specific you, Paolo, but the general you. One might sit there and go, I'm not confident to go and confirm this because of X, Y, and Z. Right? That might be a belief that you're laboring under. Fine. How do you know that to be the case? How do you know you're not confident enough to do that when you haven't tried? Now, if you look at that, it's kind of flawed reasoning in that way, and doesn't well, rather it shouldn't detract from any emotions that you bring to that particular uh, feat that you might consider it to be. But you believe in that moment that you aren't confident enough to do that. The only way that you can know you aren't confident enough to do that is if you've tried to do that. Do you see? It's like the proving of a negative, the burden of proof in that particular way. When you hear a lot of debates on religion, where a religious person might say, "Well, prove that there isn't one." That doesn't make sense. In that same way, the burden of proof in that particular situation is for somebody to prove that there is. And in that situation, for confidence to be what it is, you need to prove what it is, not just a hypothesis in that particular way. Let's see, Ahmed Salem. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. I just want to tell you that you're someone that I want to be like one day, and I'm sure that we'll meet one day within a few years, and I will remind you of this comment. Well, that's very sweet. Thank you. I appreciate the sentiments first of all, and I'd love to have a conversation with you on this particular topic whenever it is that we meet on our journeys that we call life. Whatever. I was trying to sound philosophical, being as tired as what I am, wasn't working too good. And these are the kinds of questions that we need to bring into our training in that way, right? It's all very well and good thinking, I've got a good memory, I've got a good notion of observational skill, and I've got, X, Y, Z, right? And this is really restricting it back to a moment where we are without the influence of anything close to tech. We are stripping it back, taking it as Sherlockian as we possibly can. For you to have a grounding of how good or bad you believe you are at something, you have to know. Right? And I speak about belief and knowing as part of the courses that I run a lot, because you can't believe something and know something at the same time. It's counterintuitive. They are opposite ends of a spectrum. A belief can lead to something that you know, and knowing something can lead to further beliefs on a particular topic. That's fine, but you can't do both at the same time in that way. So you might say when you're out observing, I believe that this person is a salesman because of their shoes and their clothes and the way that they're talking, the way that their hair is done, the briefcase that they're carrying with them, whatever other accoutrement they're bringing to the table. That's fine, but that is only a belief at that stage. You might be immensely confident about that. You might be. But until you go and confirm it, you don't know, right? And that's the difference that you bring to the particulars of your training in that way. If you are just drilling the access to information with speed and reasoning through any emotive hurdles that come up in order to get to some kind of hypothesis, that is a training drill. That is 100% fine because you're keeping your reflexes quick and on point. That's awesome. But you can't move further forward without confirmation. You can't move further forward without confirmation. And it's contextually going to change between person and situation and training requirements. That's 100% the case. But if you're going to do it in the way that Sherlock would have had to have done, being a child in the late 1800s, there's no opportunity for growth without confirmation of anything. How do you know you've got an immense memory palace? You have to build one. Right? How do you know you can deduce certain things about somebody? You have to deduce certain things. Deduce is the path to finding out the answer. The degree or the accuracy of your deductions is based on your confirmations in that particular stage. There have been tons of things that I've missed over the years. Tons, right? In I'll be straight with you. In my marketing material, I don't focus on them a lot, but this is a this is a different avenue. This is a different vehicle for understanding that. There's tons I miss, and that's fine because when it is that I need confirmation, I know that I can go out and get it. And it comes back to what Sherlock would have had to have understood back then, excuse me, is that whatever happens within a confirmation, being wrong and being right doesn't exist. It's a perception. It's a perception that you bring to the table. And as we've spoken about a few times, it's not about you in the moment. If you're there looking for the information that's in front, how you perceive it and what you make of it and what your feelings are on a particular topic, they don't matter. They don't matter. You need to be there processing what it is that you see in relation to any information that you have or verbal content that provides confirmation points. Whenever it is that comes across, the degree of growth that you bring to it is based on how you train in that way, right? So if I'm going to test my memory, it's fine. What is a better test of my memory? Something that I'm engaged in or something that I'm not engaged in? Right? It's a trick question in that way because it's not necessarily better or worse one way or the other. It depends on your purpose. Right? Are you training for capacity or are you training for speed? Right? Two very important requirements. How do you train both? Right? So when you're looking at drilling these processes that are needed in order to get you information from observation A to answer B, there's this whole journey in the middle that you need to navigate. This is stomping the same grounds because there is no app that does that. There is no social media thing that does that. There is no AI that does that. There is no book that does that, course that does that. There is no anything that does that. You have to. Right? Whether that be confirmation that you get through training exercises or confirmation that you get through interacting with live things, right? We take advantage of these moments as and when they pop up on a day-to-day basis. And this is what I meant in a way that is as Sherlockian as possible, because it's doing it without the influence of other things. So we need to do it without tech. We need to do it without a reliance on something. I was about to give that same list again. Oh, here we go. And I would also like to add that that's the difference between science. Let's say evidence-based psychology and psychoanalysis, for example. You can test and confirm one of them, right? Science appears to be a minefield of opinion, and it's ever evolving. As well, it should be because we're constantly learning new things. So we can always say that there are very few scientific methods, practices that are 100% concrete, finished, and done. Very few. I would struggle to name any, right? Outside of the topics that I'm investigating through my own training. And that is largely because new information comes in and changes what we previously knew about other things, and it changes what we previously knew about a previously thought of hypothesis or test or experiment in order to frame and give us new data. Science is continually learning and changing its mind, as well it should. Right? And that's the same for us in this way, because humans are always moving and wearing different clothes and in different situations and different emotions and different. We can build up a profile of a particular person after 365 different interactions with them, sure. But if we treat the 366 on the basis of the information within the 365 previous ones, then that ultimately means that we're missing the truth of what's going on in that 366th one. It's the availability cascades and biases coming into play. Right? So if we are looking at stomping the same grounds that he would have had to have done, remove all influence. Remove all influence. It's like if you're familiar with Rocky IV, Ivan Drago went into his high-tech gyms and with all of the equipment and all of the fancy buttons and flashing lights and injections and everything. And Rocky went to the woods, trained with trees and logs and lifted heavy things and ran on ground that wasn't sure. Right? He stripped it back. And that's that. If we're going to take Sherlockian training seriously, that's what we need to do. There are many technological advantages that we can bring into training. 100% there are, right? 100% there are. But if we're looking at giving ourselves sure footing on which to base growth on, then it would behoove us. I always kind of I could get a sarcastic rise out of Maddie when I use that word because it's so bloody antiquated. But it would behoove us to make sure that we are removing all influence of all other things so that we can rely on this as and when is needed. So the first port of call isn't you thinking, however minor or majorly, the first reflex isn't you thinking, well, I need to have this with me, I need to have this with me, I need to have this with me, I need to have this with me. Right? It's like being a magician and being asked to do something for somebody and you go, sorry, I haven't got any cards. That doesn't work with a cerebral skill. You need to go through the proper steps of training these kinds of things properly and taking a great deal of time to be as granular and as pedantic about why you are doing certain things in the way that you're doing them, because you have a better understanding of training then. You're not just pissing away time. Right? 10,000 hours to mastery, sure, cool. But if it's 10,000 wasted hours, you're not going to do anything. You're not going to learn anything. You need to know why you're doing it first of all in order to properly engage your brain. That's job one. Then it's being present for the information to come in and using it. Otherwise, it will just be quirky things that you heard once and then will eventually forget about. Judging by the way that memory consolidation practices work within the confines of your grey matter. So if you're going to properly stomp the same training grounds, take it all away. Take it all away. There is not one thing you could think of to train, not one thing that would require anything else other than your ability to go out and practice your reasoning around that particular topic. There's more than enough within the first two volumes of the monographs to get you to a supreme level. But if you just can't get past the confirmation bit, then you're never really going to know. It'll just be a belief, however strong. And we need solid ground to base deductions on. Right? And there are ways that we can do this. You can ask You can ask friends and family to, send you pictures or puzzles or whatnot, so you can grow confidence within the circles of people that you feel more safe with. Totally fine. Totally fine. But it's important that you push it and you push it and you push it and you push it and you push it. Right? I'm having Mr. Wayne from Batman Begins pop up in my head. Why do we fall, Mr. Wayne? So we can learn to pick ourselves up, and that's the important thing. We are going to miss. We are going to forget. That is going to happen. We are human beings. But it doesn't mean that we can't have moments of functioning like a computer or like a processing machine. That is still analogous to proper training. And that's exactly what we're talking about here, right? So, in a nutshell, if you're going to stomp the same training grounds as the big dog, the fictional big dog, remove everything that you can. Don't be thinking about books. Don't be thinking about apps. Don't be thinking about fears as best you can. And just examine the information. Right? Just examine what, and in the moments when you need the confirmation, the Dr. Pepper question comes up. What's the worst that can happen? You go up to somebody, excuse me, are you a salesman? And they go, no. How do you ask? Just curious. That's the end of it in that moment, right? And it's analogous to a few people that I know who are quite kind of conscientious about their activity online, and they don't go to certain websites because people are looking at their data and whatnot. And I'm like, okay, but what are you doing on there? Oh, I'm buying a teapot or whatever. Cool. That's not important enough for anybody to take stock of. The same thing that happens in that moment if you've asked of somebody if they're a salesman and they've gone no, and you go, okay, wander off about your day. They'll go, they might have a moment thinking, well, that's never happened before. Anyway, right? It's not like you walk up to them and go, excuse me, are you a salesman perchance? And they go, no, and shoot you in the face. That's probably the worst that could happen, but on a separate planet. And arguably, if that was a situation that would come up, you've missed a few observable steps in that situation anyway. Right? But I joke. Remove as much outside influence as you can, and you cannot get away from just doing it. Just doing it. There are situations that me and my mentalist and magician friends used to put ourselves in, like where we would set ourselves kind of logical breakdowns and questions where we'd take a card out of a deck, pop it face down on the table, and say, without turning that over, how would you figure out what that was? Start a wealth of methods that come in, right? If you want to go out and train your ability to read information in people's, I don't know, watches, right? Be asking yourself, what can you figure out from a watch? Go and look at what the watch tells you. Which sounds like a stupid thing to say out loud when you're talking about inanimate objects, but everything speaks, everything communicates. Then you have to just do it. It's that Benedict Cumberbatch speech all over again. Stop thinking and just do. All right. There we go, guys. A short one today. Mostly because, I want to go and sit down. So I'm going to love you and leave you. And next time, actually, before I forget, oh sweet irony, right? I think we're going to do an AMA. I think that's the right way to go about it. We'll do an Ask Me Anything. Okay? So look out for the posts on whatever platforms that you're on to add your questions into the comment section so that we can take them all. We had far too many for one podcast last time. I think there was like something ridiculous, like 110 of them, something like that. So if we get that many again, it might be a couple of episodes, or I might just have to pick them at random or something along those lines. But that's the way we're going to go about it. Okay. Make sure you check out the links in the description below or the QR code at the end of this when it goes out live tomorrow, because this is the streamable version the night before. We have links in there to some free training that you can get involved in with Jim Wenzel, Bob Pointer, and me. So this is Omniscience working with ProSniper Protective Services and the Behavioral Intelligence Academy to bring you some free training on communication and the way that information can be learned or communicated properly, not just verbals, but the science of having a better conversation in order to understand the bits between the lines. All right, guys. So with that in mind, see you again soon. Take care.